What's up, guys? Thomas Mott here. Welcome to the Thomas Mott Show as we look at a way too early Eagles 53-man roster depth chart going into really the full off season. Training camp is still a while away, and we'll update this many, many times, but let's go every single position group based on the NBC Sports projections. I'll give you my thoughts on this as well, and look at who we think is going to go ahead and make the roster and who we think is not going to make the roster. Starting at quarterback, they'll keep 3. Now, they might keep 2 and go practice squad, and so in this case, you see Jalen Hurts, Marcus Mariota, Tanner McKee. That would mean Ian Book would be the odd man out, either practice squad or let go, but I do feel very strong in Tanner McKee winning this job. I think he's going to have a very, very good time in front of a much better offensive line. Even the backup Eagle offensive line was better than what he played with at Stanford, but there isn't really a surprise here other than the fact that training camp and really preseason will determine who gets this job, because the backups, the third-string quarterbacks, play a ton, especially with Jalen Hurts probably not playing a lot in the preseason. Okay, over here to running backs, this is almost a non-debate right here. They will keep 4. It will be Swift, it will be Penny, it will be Gainwell, and will be Boston Scott. Sorry to all the Trey Sermon lovers out there, but they need other roster spots, or keep his roster spot open for other roster spots. And so Sermon will be the odd man out here, and he will most likely, again, stay on the practice squad for Philadelphia. Now, the question really for the running backs is what order will they put them on the depth chart? Who will be that preseason week 1 starter? You'd guess it'd be Gainwell just because he has the more experience here. I know Scott has experience too, but Gainwell's a better back overall. By the end of it, your week 1 depth chart, is it Swift who's going to get the most carries? Is it Penny? Is it Gainwell? How do you mix in Boston Scott? I don't know, but your 4 are pretty darn, I'd say, locked in there with Swift, Penny, Kenny, and Boston Scott. Okay, over here to wide receiver, your first big drama in terms of the projected depth chart here. They go with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Quez Watkins, Alameda Zaccheaus, and Britton Covey. That means that none of these dark horse undrafted free agent wide receivers actually made the roster in this projection. No Joseph Ngata. Obviously, none of the others in terms of Tyree Cleveland, Greg Ward, Devin Allen, Jaden Hasselwood. None of these guys who played with Jalen Hurts in the past or who, are fast like Devin Allen is actually make the roster. And a lot of them will make the practice squad. But how do you take any of these guys off here? Unless Quez Watkins gets cut because he's just terrible in training camp, which really won't happen, and maybe you bump somebody else up, I think these are going to be your 5. And Covey stays on the roster because he's a better punt returner than everybody else combined. He's one of their only good punt returners actually on the roster. So unless somebody has an unbelievable Travis Fulgham type training camp, these will be your 5 receivers coming out of training camp when we get into early August and early September. Tight ends, there could be some drama here. I don't expect it. I think you're going to see Dan Arnold not make the roster. Tyree Jackson will make the roster. Dalton Keeney will make the roster. It'll be Goddard. It'll be Stoll. It'll be Calcaterra. They drafted Calcaterra for a reason. I'm expecting big things from him this year. Not crazy big things, but a big improvement from where he was in 2022. And they love Stoll for what he does blocking for them and also pass catching, every now and then. 3, that's pretty normal for the Eagles and the rest of the rosters out there. Give them Goddard, Stoll, and Grant Calcaterra. Now, the offensive line will be interesting. Some teams keep 10, some teams keep 9. Who goes on the practice squad, who doesn't? But we know the basic, players in this game. Mailata, Dickerson, Kelsey, Juergens, and Johnson will be your 5 starters entering training camp. Steen is your first backup who's going to compete for a starting job. Driscoll is obviously a backup. Toth is a backup, and they love Sua Opeta in emergency situations or when they need extra offensive linemen on the football field. Sure, there's the Fred Johnsons of the world, the Trevor Reed, the Julian Good-Jones, the Cameron Tom. There are guys who can compete and guys who will be on the practice squad because the Eagles love to have their offensive linemen always working in the background, but most likely 9. I don't see them keeping 10 in terms of the final 53. Same goes for defensive tackle. I think you keep 6. That's about normal for not only the Eagles, but the rest of the National Football League, and it's very obvious. Fletcher Cox, Carter, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, Tui Pulotu, I always mess up Marlon's last name, sorry, and Moro Ojomo are both going to go ahead and make this roster. Contavious Street has a chance. Maybe he beats out Tuluti Potu, or maybe he makes the roster, some other way by keeping 7 defensive tackles. But I would see Street probably going to the practice squad because they like Ojomo. Now, Ojomo could struggle, and you could bring him back to the practice squad. That's fine. But right now, I think 6 is kind of the number here for the Philadelphia Eagles. Edge, again, talking about defensive end plus outside linebacker. You have Reddick, Sweat, Brandon Graham, Nolan Smith, Patrick Johnson, and Janarius Robinson. I'll be very curious to see what Kyron Johnson and Teron Jackson are going to do this offseason because they've kind of had some time in the Eagles organization to try and prove themselves. And obviously, I would think you keep, Kyron Johnson on this overall practice squad. But this is fascinating to me because Derek Barnett's the odd man out. Now, I think Barnett would make it over Janarius Robinson in this case. I think he's going to come back looking really good, not superstar category, not Josh Sweat or Brandon Graham, but I do think he makes this roster. He would have to be really, really bad at training camp for them to cut him because the dead money just doesn't make a lot of sense. What do you guys think so far? Has there been a dramatic cut that you think, excuse me, Thomas, I don't agree with that, I don't like? Give me your thoughts down below in the comments section. Linebackers, they'll keep 4. I'd be surprised if they go with 5, but again, it depends on how many of the other position groups you want to keep because you got to get to 53. Nakobe Dean, Nicholas Morrow, Sean Bradley, and Christian Ellis. The shocker here would be Davion Taylor. I think Taylor would make it over Christian Ellis right now. I think the injury 2 years ago was a big stump in his career, a big roadblock in what was going to be maybe a starting job in 2023 or 2022 until they had to go ahead and get Kaiser White. But I do think Taylor makes this overall. I think your starters are Dean and Morrow, but I do think Sean Bradley's a really good special teams player, and I think Davion Taylor has a chance, if Dean were to struggle, to maybe make this roster, but don't quote me on that. All right, cornerbacks here, only going to keep 6. You got Darius Slade, James Bradbury, Avonte Maddox, Zach McPherson, Keely Ringo, and Greedy Williams. Josh Joby is the harder cut, I would say, out of all these players because he does have some experience, but the problem is it's not good experience, right? You drafted Zach McPherson in the 3rd round. You drafted Keely Ringo early in this draft. Greedy Williams was signed, obviously, to be on this roster. There has to be an odd man out here, and I think Joby is the guy that's not going to make it. Same goes for Josiah Scott and Mario Goodrich. Maybe you keep Scott or Joby on the practice squad, but 6 is probably where they're going to go, especially because you have Darius Slade, James Bradbury, and Avonte Maddox, who are all going to be starters. You only need 3 other backups behind them, and they like McPherson or are trying to like McPherson, Ringo, and Greedy Williams. All right, we'll wrap up here with the safety group and then get to special teams. Blankenship, Edmonds, Brown, Kayvon Wallace, no shocker in all of these. I think Justin Evans was signed pre-draft he was signed pre-draft, but he was signed simply in case they couldn't get anybody in the draft. They wanted to have that kind of veteran presence in case all things went south, but Philadelphia was able to figure things out with Sidney Brown. I'd be shocked if it's Evans over Wallace. I think Wallace is going to really make a run this year, at least try to. Doesn't mean he's going to be good, but I think he's going to be the final safety on this roster. They like him. They just don't love him. They don't think he's going to be a starter in 2023, but maybe in the future. Problem is he's running out of time. Special teams, I disagree here. I think Zentner's going to win this special teams job over Aaron Sipos. We'll see, obviously, who wins the punting job. Sure, Sipos has kind of, the veteran presence in there, but he doesn't have a very good track record where you sit back and go, oh, we got to keep him. That is a wide open punter battle. We talked about that in the past. Elliott, Lovato to long snap. You talk about 2 Pro Bowlers there, and then Ty Zentner overall. So that's 53. Now, there will probably be plenty of these players who either actually make the roster or make the practice squad, and obviously we'll talk about that when the time comes. But right now, to me, it's pretty simple where they're going to go. These are your 53-man players, and I'm curious where you guys are at on this as well. I'm Thomas Mott. This has been the Thomas Mott Show.